2023 F1 season is a little over a month away, so I figured it was time to put my predictions out there for the world to see. My 2022 predictions were absolutely brutal coming into a new set of regulations, so I'm hoping that 2023 will go a bit better now that we kind of have an idea of where things are. Similar to last year, I'm going to be going through my predictions for the Drivers' Championship, the Constructors' Championship, and then giving 3 kind of overall predictions for this year. I am going to start with the drivers this year, though. I feel like the constructors gives it away if you do that one first. First off, in 20th, I have Logan Sargent. He is basically filling in as a surrogate for Nicholas Latifi. I do believe that he will be much closer to Albon in pace than Latifi was, but I think the fact that he's going to take a little while to get adjusted to F1 and the fact that the Williams is probably going to be the back team again, I don't see too much optimism for Logan Sargent's first year. But we'll see. I'm sure that they will, once again, if their car is similar, maybe have a chance at some of the more power-dependent tracks like Spa or Monza. And so I'm hoping that he'll still be able to squeak out a few points. In P19, I have Alex Albon, and similar to Logan Sargent, he's just in a Williams, and that's kind of where they're at right now. I don't see much changing with them, but I do think that now that Albon is kind of settled into that team, I feel like he will get more points this year than he did last year. In 18th, I have Yuki Tsunoda. Unfortunately, I think this is going to mean the end of Yuki's F1 career unless the AlphaTauri is so bad that he couldn't have had a chance at any more points than he got. I just don't trust that AlphaTauri will be able to develop the car to a place that is better than this past year, and they've lost all the expertise of Pierre Gasly as well. And so in 17th, I have Nick de Vries. I think he will outperform Yuki. He just has a little bit more consistency, and I would hope that he'd be less prone to making mistakes. That was been Yuki's Achilles heel the past few years, and so I think if Nick does beat Yuki, I think Yuki will be out. But I don't see much from Nick either. I don't know. I personally don't really rate him as a driver. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, but yeah, I don't know. AlphaTauri in general are just a meh team, so even if their car was good, they might not get full potential out of it with those 2 drivers. So I don't know. We'll see. And in 16th, I have Nico Hülkenberg. I think Haas will score points again, and similar to last year, I think they're going to start off the year a little bit stronger and then kind of fall off as the year goes on. I think we would all love a miraculous Nico Hülkenberg podium, but I do not think it's in the cards for him, so we'll see. Hopefully he will be less prone to crashes than Mick was, and I think he has the consistency and the experience to help Haas, but I don't know if he has the pace anymore. And in 15th, I have Kevin Magnussen. Kind of a similar vein to Nico. I think K-Mag is a little bit more settled in the team, obviously since he was there before and then has had a year back in with them. Kevin just makes so many silly mistakes sometimes on those first laps that have been causing him to go to the back. So maybe he'll have a little bit more luck this year, but he needs to learn how to quell his aggression on the first lap and just get through it to maintain his position if he managed to qualify well. But I do think he has more pace than Nico, partially because he did get a pole last year. In 14th, I have Zhou Guanyu. I do think that he has closed the gap to Valtteri, and so I do not think that the points difference will be as big this year. He's proven to be very consistent, but I worry that he might not have the pace. So we will see how this goes. This might be a bit of a bold prediction, but I think if Alfa Romeo does the same thing that they did last year, where they started the year off really strong, I think Joe is at a place where he should be able to capitalize and get some points. In 13th, I have Valtteri Bottas. I do think that Valtteri won't have as big of a points advantage over Joe, but I do trust that he should be able to have some good qualifying sessions at some points in the year and be able to capitalize with some points off of that. However, I don't see the Alfa Romeo being strong enough for him to be higher than this. And again, I do think that they will probably tail off throughout the year. Now, in 12th, I have Lance Stroll. Stroll has proven to be consistent, and then he will have maybe 1 or 2 races a year where he just does something incredible and you're like, where did that come from and why haven't you put that effort in every race weekend? So I think he will manage to get up to P12 based solely on a few of those bigger results. But he just makes some boneheaded decisions sometimes that just leave you completely questioning, like, why is this guy in F1? And I don't think that he will get the advantage considering who his new teammate is. In P11, I have Pierre Gasly. I do think that he will do okay at Alpine. It will take him a little bit of time to get adjusted. Plus, he has that risk of missing out on a race because of the penalty points that he's amassed. He'll either take that and have a race where he gets 0 points, or he will have to be a little bit more cautious and not get into any trouble with any type of penalty points. So can't push on track limits, can't speed, and can't be as aggressive in making certain overtakes. So we'll see how those penalties affect Pierre, but I do foresee him finishing behind Esteban, who I have in P10. Estebesti has been settled in that Alpine team for, I think, 3 seasons now, and so he knows how the team operates and should be able to get the best out of that car that he was in last year and did a great job in. I do think that he will beat out Pierre. I think similar to kind of last year, I think Pierre will have some races where he is the much quicker driver and able to kind of put in something a little bit more impressive, but I think Esteban is a more consistent driver, and I think will consistently be able to get those like 8th, 9th place finishes or squeak one higher than that every once in a while. And so that's why I have him ahead of Pierre, where I think Pierre might have a few races where he'll make a mistake in qualifying or push things too hard. He also might have the risk of running into that Alpine reliability issue. In P9, I have Oscar Piastri. I do think it's going to take Oscar a lot of time to get accustomed to F1 as a rookie. So I think starting off the bat, I think he will be a bit off of Lando's pace, but I think as the year goes on, he will get closer and closer. I do think that he will outperform what Daniel was able to do in that car, given that he doesn't have the experience in faster cars or better cars. And so similar to Lando, this will be the only F1 car he's ever known because he didn't even drive in an Alpine. So I think that will give him a little bit of an advantage in terms of adjusting to that new car. I don't know if we'll get any like super impressive performances out of Oscar or not. I don't know that much about him as a driver, even though he won F2 and F3. So I guess we'll see how this year goes. He might impress me, but I think I will constantly be comparing him to Daniel because that is the nature of how he got that spot at McLaren. Now in P8, this might be a bit of a hot take, but I have Fernando Alonso. I do think that the Aston Martin is going to be significantly faster this year than it was last year, and that's reflected in how I have these drivers ordered. I just think Fernando is going to be the number 1 driver in that team. He's going to get the benefit of the doubt. As much as Lance likes to think that he will constantly be the number 1 driver because of his father, I think Aston Martin will realize how much better of a driver Fernando is, and if they want to optimize points, they're going to have to prioritize him. So I do think that he will finish P8, and with the Aston Martin also being much more reliable than the Alpine proved to be last year, I think he will be able to make the most of that and get a lot of points. In P7, for the 2nd year in a row, 3rd year in a row? No, he was higher last in 2021. Anyways, in P7, I have Lando Norris, the best of the rest. I do foresee Lando getting a podium this year, probably more than 1. I do think that the midfield is going to close up the gap a little bit to the front runners now that they kind of will be able to copy off of what the front runners did last year in terms of getting optimum performance. But Lando is just so consistent, rarely makes a mistake. I would be shocked if he finished lower than 7th, and shocked in a good way if he finishes higher than 7th, which I do not think is a possibility, but you never know. You never know. In P6, I have Carlos Sainz. I think the Ferrari is going to fall back a little bit, and I think Sainz will suffer as a result. I do think that he will start the year off a bit stronger than he did last year and not making so many mistakes and having lap 1 incidents, but I do foresee him struggling to keep up with the other 5 drivers in the top teams. In 5th, I have Sergio Perez. And, well, I think they're just going to prioritize Max. And so Sergio is going to get left behind in terms of the development of the car. I think he will perform like last year very strongly at street races, which seem to be most of the first races of the year. So I think Sergio will start the year off strong, but I think as the year goes on and you get into more of the purpose-built tracks, I think he's going to struggle, and I think he's going to fall back. And I do think that the top 3 teams are going to be closer together this year, so that will mean that he will fall further back than he did in 2022. In P4, I have Charles Leclerc. I think that once again, Charles will be an exceptionally quick driver. I think he will be able to qualify extremely well, but I do not trust the Ferrari to support him with strategy, and also their development consistently dips off year after year going further into the year, and so I think that's going to be a struggle for him. In P3, I have George Russell. After the porpoising dilemma of 2022, I think Mercedes are going to start off the year stronger, and I think they are going to be able to carry that throughout the year. I'm hoping for a battle with the Red Bulls for the championship this year, but with that, I do think that Hamilton will outperform George Russell, and for that reason, I have Lewis in 2nd. Lewis is still a stronger driver than George. George is a little bit more mistake prone. I think Lewis just still has that Mercedes team wrapped around his finger, and I think if they have a chance at a title fight, they will try to prioritize Lewis getting his 8th over George getting his 1st, because George still has many years to go in F1, and I think that he will be smart and patient and know that his time will come, especially if they can get Lewis his 8th, and then I feel like Lewis would be ready to retire after that happens. And I think George is playing a long game because he is the mastermind. And then in 1st, I do have Max Verstappen. We've seen in F1 that things seem to be very cyclical, and when there's a technical change, one team is going to nail it, and then throughout the rest of that era of technical regulations, that team is still the top team. We've seen that in the past 3 eras where it was Red Bull dominating, and then Mercedes dominating, and then Mercedes dominating again, until Red Bull was finally able to win that last one in 2021 off of a miracle and a mistake by Massey. At this point in time, I just do not see how anyone can beat Max Verstappen, even if the Red Bull does fall off a little bit. I just think that he is so good that he will be able to still take the championship. So that is what I have for the drivers' rankings. So let's get into the constructors. So this is probably pretty obvious from the drivers' rankings that I just did. A lot of the positions that I had didn't have very much mixture between each team. It was kind of like the 2 drivers of one team and the 2 drivers of the next team and then 2 of the next and so on. Do think that there will be a little bit of a change here on one team in particular, which I will mention later. So in P10, I have Williams. I just don't think that their situation has changed enough to warrant them to be any higher on the grid. It took them a while to get a new team principal. It's going to take James Vowles a long time to get settled into the Williams team. I don't know how much commitment Doralton has anymore to making this team good, and so I don't know if they will have the full financial backing. And morale's just low there. It's been low for years, and unfortunately, I don't see them changing their position anytime soon. In P9, I have AlphaTauri. I do think that they will be able to make a better car this year than they did last year. However, I do not have as much trust in the drivers that they have to be able to get the most out of that car. I think if Pierre was still in the team, I think they would manage to be a little higher up the grid, but I don't have very much trust in Nick or Yuki as drivers, and I think it will cost them. In P8, I have Haas. I do think that Kevin and Nico are both very competent drivers, even though neither of them are at the prime of their career anymore. And I think that consistency will get them more points this year than they did last year. And they're so reliant on Ferrari and what Ferrari is doing. The incompetence at Ferrari kind of trickles down to Haas. And I don't fully trust Gunter Steiner as team principal either. I know everyone loves him, but I don't think he is the best at managing the relationship with the drivers. We saw that how his relationship with Mick deteriorated last year, and when Kevin and Grosjean were both in the team, he didn't do a very good job of managing that either. And so with a little bit of history of tension between Kevin and Nico, I worry a little bit for how that's going to go. Now, Haas, AlphaTauri, and Williams, I think you would kind of classify as the backmarkers for 2023. And then my P7 team, Alfa Romeo, I think are going to be kind of in a no man's land between kind of the more midfield teams and the backmarkers. Mainly because I think similar to last year, they're going to start off the year strong, but then tail off as the year goes on and not be able to keep up with the development of the other teams. I do trust that Seidel coming in will help, and the fact that Joe will be closer to Bottas, I think they might be a little bit more even in points, but I just don't think that their car will be quick enough to consistently get points week to week. Now for the midfield, and this is where things get a little bit spicy. I have Alpine in P6. I think they're going to drop back a little bit. And there are a couple reasons for this. I think that they're going to suffer a little bit from losing the knowledge and expertise that Fernando has, and also the pace that Fernando has. I think that it's going to take Pierre a little bit of time to get used to the Alpine team, and I do think that there is going to be conflict between Pierre and Esteban that is going to cost Alpine points at some point during the year. And depending on how contentious that gets, it could definitely impact their on-track performance. I also don't see them fully fixing their reliability issues that they've had last year. And I think with the other teams around them probably improving the speed of their car, I think Alpine will lose that advantage. And if they continue to have reliability issues, that will cause them severe disadvantage to the other teams in the midfield. So I do have them dropping to 6th. And then in P5, I have Aston Martin. I just think that Fernando coming into that team will do wonders. A lot of people seem to think that him and Lance will have tension, but I think similar to what happened the first year he was back at Alpine, I think the first year will be okay. It's going to be year 2 that causes the problems. Fernando has so much experience, so much knowledge about F1. He is very impressive as a driver, and I think if the Aston Martin has any pace whatsoever, I think he will be able to get it out of that car and consistently finish in the points. I think what's going to hold Aston Martin back is Lance Stroll. And I think this might finally be the year where people really start to question, is Stroll good enough to be an F1? And I think the questions will start to come to Lawrence Stroll, that if he wants to be taken seriously, he might have to consider where his son is and the privileges that his son is given. Because I think if Fernando can prove just how strong this car is, it's gonna be a bit spicy if Lance is costing them money. So in 4th, I therefore have McLaren. I do think that Lando Norris once again is going to be best of the rest, and I think he will be probably significantly higher than anyone else in the midfield. I think Oscar will be closer to him than Daniel was, and so with the combination of them both performing well, I think they will be able to outscore Aston Martin and Alpine in the midfield. But I still do not think that McLaren will have enough to get into that top three with the top teams on the grid. In third, I have Ferrari. Ferrari is going to just continue to do the same thing that they do year after year after year, which is start off the year very strong, manage to pull out a few wins, and then reliability issues come in, driver error issues come in, and strategy issues come in, and the fact that Fred Vasseur might not be completely integrated into that team yet and not know kind of where he's still trying to figure out what the causes of these strategy errors are, and still it's very much like a troubleshooting year, I think, for Ferrari. I don't see any way that they could make more mistakes than they did last year, but I think the combination of Red Bull consistently being stronger than Ferrari operationally, plus Mercedes hopefully making their way back up the grid and having a stronger car in 2023, I just think that Ferrari will lose out a little bit because of that. So in P2, I do have Mercedes, but I think in the constructors, it's going to be extremely close with Red Bull. And the results of this, I think, are going to come down to Sergio Perez. I think that Lewis and George are going to be very close to each other, but I do think that they are going to take points off of each other, which I think will give Max the advantage in the drivers. It's just going to depend on if Sergio is able to get closer to Max's level than he did last year. Now, I don't predict that Red Bull will fall to second, but I think if Red Bull does come second in the constructors, then I do think that Sergio Perez's place at Red Bull will come into question, because it will most definitely be his fault if that is what happens, because I don't think Max will fall off at all unless there is some sort of crazy reliability issue. Overall, how I think I see the year going is that Red Bull and Ferrari are going to start off the year strong. Ferrari might take a few points off of Red Bull with some race wins. But I think as the year goes on, I think Red Bull will tail off a little bit. I don't think they will have as strong of a second half as they did in 2022 because of the time penalty that they got on their wind tunnel. I think that will affect their ability to develop the car throughout the year. And so I think they will tail off towards the end of the year, whereas Mercedes might start the year off a little bit slower and then develop their car great throughout the year and then have more wins at the end of the season. But I think that Red Bull will be able to maintain the consistency throughout the year to come out on top, whereas Ferrari will have a poor second half and Mercedes will have a poor first half. I think that makes sense, but that's kind of how I see the year going. So I'm hoping that that will mean that there is a bit more of a title fight and maybe a three-way title fight. But I do still feel that Red Bull will come out on top. And as much as I would love to predict something else, I think it's the safest bet. So those are my predictions for the Constructors' Championship. And finally, we have my 3 hot takes for the year. These ones aren't as spicy as 2022's predictions that I had, but I'm hoping that they come to fruition. So my first hot take is that I think the midfield will be closer to the top teams, and I think that 10 drivers overall will be getting podiums. My guess will be the top 6 in the Red Bulls, Mercedes, and Ferraris. I think Lando Norris will get a podium again. I think that Fernando Alonso will get a podium. And then I think one of the 2 Alpine drivers will get a podium at some point during the year if they don't have a reliability issue. I still do not think that any team outside of the top 3 will get a race win, though. As much as I would love that, I think it would have to be a crazy race, and I just think those 3 teams are too strong, and it'd be extremely unlikely for in one race for all 6 of them to be taken out unless you get a Bottas bowling situation. My second hot take for 2023 is that I think at least one driver will be dropped because of poor behavior with their teammate. My most likely culprits for this would be Red Bull. Alpine, and Haas. It's been a while since we've had a year like this where I think there's so many driver pairings that have the potential to get heated. We saw at the end of last year with the radio messages between Max and Checo that relationship is getting rocky. We know the past history of Pierre and Esteban, and I think if one tiny incident happens, I think that could set them off and it could get quite dramatic. And Haas has a tendency of battling with each other, and with Gunter Steiner not necessarily being the best at kind of managing those driver conflicts, I think there could be issues there as well. And I don't know if Nico could survive that kind of situation. And then my third hot take, which I am praying comes true, is that I think there will be less than 50 points separating first from third in the Drivers' Championship. So I think that Max, Lewis, and George will all finish within 50 points of each other. So that'll likely mean that the championship will come down to either Brazil or Las Vegas, which would be interesting. Imagine the championship wrapping up in Las Vegas. The party there would be second to none, and I think that's probably why they wanted being the second to last race. I would love it if it could go down to the final race, which would mean a difference of less than 25 even, but I don't know if I see that happening. But a girl can hope and a girl can dream. So those are my 3 hot takes for 2023. Let me know your hot takes in the comment down below, and like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video. I'm so excited for the 2023 season, and car launches are starting up here soon. We got Drive to Survive coming out. There's going to be so much more content coming your way, and oh, I can't wait. I can't wait at all. I'm so excited for this season. So see you guys around. Bye.